Meanwhile, as a libertarian, I'm like, guys, we're $20 trillion in debt. I'm sorry that the little boy got his feelings hurt. And I'm sorry that Trump and Melania are having a bad day. But we need to focus on what matters. And we need to have consistent standards that rise above tribe. And we need to start thinking about what government is really for, that it's not to make people better people or to fix everyone's problems. It's simply to protect the life, liberty, and property of the people so that the people can do those things for themselves. And with that, I'd like to take some questions. But I'm going to take it.
I just wanted to point out that as of today on Fox News, some senators research that it turns out that Fox News is only supported 48% by conservatives and 52% by liberals.
That's interesting. As somebody who neither favors nor disfavors Fox News or CNN, I think it's hilarious how it's become a tribal identifier, you know. I listen to CNN because I'm a sophisticated liberal. You know, or it's like it shouldn't, you know, I actually like to read the Wall Street Journal. And there was an interesting study that showed that the Wall Street Journal's coverage of Trump has been about 70% negative, 30% positive. But you compare that to the Washington Post, which is 96% negative, 4% positive. And given the fact that there have been some self-wounds, mishaps and mistakes over the last 6 months, I think that the Wall Street Journal is probably in the right ballpark of coverage. The idea that 96% of everything Donald Trump has done has been bad is truly absurd and kind of deranged. And I think there were some deranged people on the right during the Obama years. And I say this as somebody who thought, I think I would put President Obama in my top 5 worst presidents in history. But I didn't think he was Satan. And there were people on the right who were just convinced that he was a Muslim Kenyan who had infiltrated America. That same kind of absolute hatred, we see that on the left as well. And I think we're seeing it in spades. And I think it's actually going to hurt them. Because when people look out onto a crowd of angry people, and some of them are wearing body part costumes, that's insane, right? Nobody does that. I think there would have been a great parody in which you had the women in the body part costume that rhymes with the capital of Saskatchewan. Yeah, rhymes with that capital. That was the costumes, right? At that women's march. I would have loved to have seen Dolores. That was awesome. But I would have loved to have seen a parody in which you had, you know, a male body part running across the protest towards the female, you know. But here's the problem with Saturday Night Live. Some of their work is truly brilliant, but they miss opportunities because they're so far left. Like, they catch the opportunities to parody the right, and that's good, because parody is a necessary antidote to BS. Or at least it makes us feel better. But why would they miss glaring? I mean, you've got stretch-face Nancy Pelosi and the things she says. Why aren't they parodying that? Why aren't they parodying the gal in the V costume? Why aren't they parodying any of this stuff? It's because their liberalism has left them with a blind spot. And that blind spot is a human tendency. And I would say that breaking past it is something that everybody would benefit from doing.
So, when you get hate mail, how much of that is just a vocal minority, or is it really representative? And if it's actually representative, like if everybody that's listening to you just wants to hear what they already believe, what are you actually doing? I mean, what positive traction are you getting?
I would say it's a vocal minority, and a vocal minority that struggles with spelling and syntax. And I don't really know what the all caps thing is about. I think it may not be a good thing though. But it is a vocal minority, and they're mean. They're really mean. I'll give them that. And I've gotten pretty thick-skinned, but occasionally one would cut.
Do you think that because you're a woman, you get a lot more nastiness?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. And I say this as somebody who, I traveled to the Middle East by myself. I'm a capable woman. I love men, a lot of male friends. And I'm not, I'm not looking under rocks for sexism, but to be a woman in talk radio, you have to prove yourself 100 times over. Steve can say something, and it's like, oh yeah, that's got to be true. I say something, I better back it up, right? And it just is what it is, and it's not true for every listener. It's a minority of listeners for whom, women shouldn't have strong opinions, I guess, in their mind. It is what it is. They do email me. I also get liberal hate mail, which is great because then I get it from both sides. Because, if you're going to be in a windstorm, you really want a crosswind, ideally, with the hail from both sides. Like, it's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, as long as it's equal, so you don't blow over. But, yeah, so for my Denver Post articles, which I have a very gentle style both on air, I have strong opinions, but I have a very kind of gentle, moderate style for the most part, right? And I try to kind of ease people into stuff. I still get hate mail from liberals, and I'll be like, okay, I got a woman saying, you're no different than Kellyanne Conway. I can't believe you're defending Trump. Well, sometimes I do defend Trump because sometimes he does the right thing. And I don't think there's any Russian collusion. For one reason, political life's not that interesting. You know what I mean? Like, I've worked on Capitol Hill. It's like high school. It's not like the movies. It's not like there's Cloak and Dagger. It's not House of Cards. It's just ordinary people trying to do stuff. It's not like, hey, buddy, let's collude. Like, nobody does that, right? And what does collusion look like? Collusion looks like Congressman A going, yeah, I'll vote for your post office if you vote for my education bill. Let's collude, right? It's mundane. It's banal, even. It's not, there's no cloak and dagger. It's accidental. Now, could there have been somebody on the Trump campaign that talked with some Russian somewhere? Certainly, and I think Flynn has probably demonstrated that. But do I think that Donald Trump was just, kicking back with Putin and been like, yeah, let's win this election together? Like, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. And so I'd said on channel, because I do Channel 7 twice a month, and I had said, there is no collusion. Life doesn't work that way. It's just, let it go. This woman saw that, unaware of the larger body of my Trump criticalness, was like, you're just like Kellyanne Conway and Ann Coulter. I was like, really? Like, they would seriously chafe at the comparison. They'd be like, we're nothing like her. So, it's just interesting, and this is what I think. Anger can be healthy. Anger can motivate us to do things. When I think about, to your point about, I used to knit booties back when my hands still worked, for unborn children. 1 million unborn children's death a year should make us angry. The fact that these children did not get to take their first breath, the very thing we take for granted because we do it how many times a minute, right? That should make us angry. And out of that anger should come some action, making things for unborn babies to give to their expectant moms so that they can embrace their child, right? Volunteering at a pregnancy center, helping a friend who's struggling with an unplanned pregnancy. Anger should motivate us to do constructive things. It should not motivate us to email some random radio host a poorly written paragraph about how they're a raving liberal. Like, it's just not constructive. And there are people out there that are just randomly angry. And they're angry at everybody. And they're angry at the host for not saying what they want. And then they're angry, they don't like your blog. So they're angry about that, and I got to tell you about it. And it's like, I just kind of wish for them the same peace and joy that I have in my life. That includes anger, good anger that's motivated to do good things. Like start a Liberty on the Rocks, for example.
Oh, thanks for that.
You know what I mean?
Good plug.
And all of the great things that everyone in this room is doing.
Do you have an opinion on the ongoing political impotency of the libertarian movement?
Well, being a fairly new libertarian, I think part of it's the nature of libertarians. We're all kind of independent, right? So I think that's part of it. And I also wonder, the point that you go from being a critic to an actor, you have to start making compromises. And if you are an idealist by nature, that's a difficult step to make. So to go from being somebody who says, and not just compromise, you have to make hard decisions. So let's say oh, you rock, thank you. And I'm going to temper it with some hot water here. Reagan was right. Always drink hot water when you do speaking. Not only compromises, but then there's also costs, right? So I think about the most absurd political program that I could think of, or one of the most absurd, that's AmeriCorps, because it's for paid volunteering. Paid volunteering is a little bit like jumbo shrimp on a menu, right? It's not logical. And I hate to channel Spock, but it's not logical, right? So there's this program, we pay young people to volunteer. I don't even like to say that. Can't pay someone to volunteer. You're in one of those programs?
I show up this office building voluntarily every day.
It's, and in the private sector, I dig it. As a taxpayer, I'm kind of like, I don't want to pay those volunteers. Well, AmeriCorps. Now, you've probably seen him on CNN or Fox News. Pete Hoekstra, congressman. He's really good friends with the congressman I worked, so I got to know him a little bit. He's a good person. He had gotten to the outs with the Bush administration because he opposed No Child Left Behind locally. Well, to get himself back into good graces with the administration because he wanted to do things on counter-espionage. He wanted to get onto those committees and do that kind of work. But he had to make nice with George W. Bush. George W. Bush is a really good man, I believe, but very much a big government Republican. The way that Pete chose to get back on the good graces was to become the #1 Republican champion of AmeriCorps. And it worked. He did get to go and he got on the right committee for, he got on the intelligence committee for it. The question is that when you go from being a vocal critic to being an actor, sometimes you have to make compromises. I happen to think that particular compromise was the wrong one. But there are going to be some things you're going to have to alter. It's going to be like, Congressman Kaufman, in order to kind of represent his district, has now gone kind of middle-ish on immigration for a tactical reason. If he goes too hard, he loses his seat. What do we get? We get a Democrat, right? So there are trade-offs. So that's part of the difficulty if you're an idealistic person is making those trade-offs. I also wonder if the spectrum isn't a difficulty. If you've got people who believe there should be virtually no government, kind of a Murray Rothbard, and then you've got people like Milton Friedman who say, I see a limited role in these areas. It's tough. I mean, it's tough to get all, because if we are libertarian, we are independent by nature. And so I think that's an issue as well. But I also know that once upon a time the Republicans were a wingnut group, and the Whigs were going like, oh, don't even take those people seriously. If you really want power, you better be a Whig. Yeah, right. Now it's just a hair accessory.
I guess following up on that thought too, I'm a lifelong Republican with a lot of libertarian leanings. I kind of subscribe to the Mike Rosen party Trump's person. I have a Turbis customized with that saying on it. How do libertarians make inroads? And I truly believe the only way is through the Republican Party. We are a two-party system. You have to accept that, whether you like it or not. Speaking back to the lesser of two evils, it's certain races where libertarians are the difference in the outcome of that election. Like, just makes me want to cringe because we end up with that liberal candidate.
Yeah.
How do they, I guess, bring their philosophy, to a more mainstream thought process?
I used to believe that I would kind of live out my libertarian tendencies within the Republican Party, especially since at some point I think I would actually make a pretty decent senator if I decide to run. Right? But then something snapped in me last year because I saw people that I admired and trusted whitewashing things that I had long heard them say were bad. Like, they were like, we can't tolerate people who sleep around on their spouses. If they lie to their spouses, they'll lie to us. Oh, but it's really not so bad. What's between a man and a woman is between them, and it really won't affect anything. I watched somebody turn like that from saying one thing and then saying exactly the opposite. And I thought, I can't, I mean, I'm more idealistic than pragmatic, but I can't get behind that. I can't get behind the, lies are terrible. We need to stick to the truth. Oh, well, it's me. That's awesome. Thank you, sister. You hypocrite. And I have to admit, I think it's probably a personality thing. I just need to figure out a way to turn down my phone without it doing all kinds of weird stuff. So, phone needs to be replaced. For me, consistency matters more than outcome to a degree, and it's a temperament thing. There are kind of two philosophies of looking at decisions. There's a more pragmatic one that looks at the end, and there's another one that looks at the means. So you could say it's utilitarianism versus deontological if you wanted to get super nerdy, right? I live my life on the deontological, which means I'm looking at the means, not the end. Because I feel like means matter, and that ultimately you cannot do wrong in the service of right. In fact, it was Cicero, the statesman, had to have been practical enough to get himself elected to the Roman Senate, although I think he was later probably killed. Yeah, I think he was done in by that. But anyway, he said you cannot do wrong in the service of the right and expect to be successful. Basically, I paraphrase. And if you think about it, I just read a study that said that businesses that encourage unethical behavior in their staff in order to succeed will ultimately fail because they ruin the work environment. The people who are decent leave. What's left is the unethical people who are just as happy to rob you as the customer, right? And they end up losing money. And so I would say that every time we do what we think is practical, we got to be hard hitting, we got to hit back, we got to be as underhanded as they are. Every time we do that, we will ultimately sabotage ourselves and our movement. Means matter. That said, I have tremendous respect for people who voted for Trump by saying, we've got two options here, and this woman is horrible. I'm going to go with the slightly less horrible choice. That's the utilitarian, and it is totally valid. I came at it from the fact that I cannot say that I would never elect someone like that and then do that very thing. It's just something I couldn't do, though I want everyone to do their own thing, which I guess is a libertarian.
I think I don't have a question, but just to continue the discussion, I think I was a Republican up until probably about the same time I think you switched, and I re-registered libertarian. So I was a Republican my whole life, and everybody in this room right here, pretty much everyone, we believe in markets, right? Markets function efficiently. I think I just got to a point where a vote is basically you're purchasing into what a politician is selling, right? So I got to a point where I'm like, I can't buy this product anymore because I don't believe in any of it, what the Republican Party was selling. And I get the argument it is a two-party system, like the way the Constitution is written. We're only ever going to have two parties. I don't think under the Constitution we'll ever have a third major party. So it's going to be one of two parties. But I just got to a point where I couldn't buy what they were selling anymore and sleep at night.
Yeah. Well, and I still super support some of my Republican friends.
Yeah.
I love Cory Gardner. I love Mike Kaufman. I really love Ken Buck. These guys are my friends, and I want to do what I can to support good Republicans. And so that means that if I lived in Broomfield, I'd support Mike. It means that I support local candidates. I'm happy to have them on the air. I'll go give a speech for them. But the Republican Party needs to change for me to go back, even though I support many of its things. If it doesn't change, I hope libertarianism or something else ultimately replaces it. Because we are $20 trillion in debt. We do have a behemoth government. And there are far too many Republicans who are totally fine with all of that. And I just can't be with that until it changes.
More questions?
I'll make a comment if I may. I sort of see things in reverse, I think, being that I started out as a held my nose enough and talked myself into voting Republican the last 7 times. One of my standard jokes about this is I got sick and tired of voting for losers, so then I voted for McCain. And promptly lost. But it seems to me like a lot of what I see happening is that the Republican Party has nominated nice guys, or people that are supposed to have clean records or whatever, and yeah, and faithful to their wives, whatever, and they lost a lot. And it seems to me like they sort of said, okay, screw it, we're going to nominate somebody. Let's nominate somebody who may be a bastard, but he's really going to fight and he's going to really do everything he can to try to win. I just don't think you can really say that about Romney or McCain. I think they missed a lot of opportunities, things they could have done to win.
It's easy to armchair quarterback. We all do it. I'm sure people will even do it when they're listening to me on the air and they're like, she could have put that a lot more eloquently, and they would be right? When you're in the hot seat, it's a lot harder. And I would say that after President Obama, then not even candidate, then Illinois senator, when he gave that 2006 speech at the DNC, he was going to be elected. That speech, he is mesmerizing in that speech. I actually use that speech in part of my speaking, when I teach public speaking. Not because I like President Obama, it's just that that speech is perfect, and its delivery is perfect. And the fact that he'd be the first black president, it didn't matter who would have ran against him. I'm pretty sure he would have won. And that Romney and McCain didn't lose because they were too nice. They lost for complex reasons. And Hillary didn't lose because the Russians intervened, or because in fact, I bet there's probably 20 reasons she lost, including, believe it or not, a little bit of sexism. She is also a horrifically dislikable person. But women have to do really, really well when they run, and she flubbed it on so many levels. Especially the blue suit with the white striping. It reminded me of Mr. Green Jeans. Oh, Mr. Rogers. Yeah. Yeah, you had to. It was... there was I jest, obviously. She was a horrible candidate. But for the left, which is doing the same thing, they're going, they're taking one lesson from it, whatever happens to suit their thinking, and say, well, she lost because she wasn't mean enough, or she lost because she was a woman, or she lost because of the blue and white pantsuit, whatever they're saying, when in fact it was probably 20 reasons. And it's a very sharply divided country. It was a difficult election for a lot of people. I said a lot of really good people I know, Republicans, voted for Trump. I even knew some Republicans who voted for Hillary. I knew Republicans who voted for who's the geographically challenged person? Yeah, Gary Johnson. Or the now forever never to be known again, McMullen, right? Who I voted for. Because I thought, this guy represents me in a way. In some ways he doesn't, because I think he's kind of an idiot. But, it was not a good election with very bad choices. And now we have to go forward. And what do we do about that? And I think we do that by constantly advocating for the principles of limited government. When somebody says there ought to be a law, say, really? Maybe there shouldn't be a law. Maybe it should be you. Because the one thing I didn't tell you about is how I went from being a hardcore Democrat to being a Republican. What happened to me, and I was like, I wasn't one of those people that would have I wasn't rude about it, but I was a far lefty. And looking back, I was absurd. Imagine short, platinum blonde hair, a nose ring, and idiotic clothing. And that would have been me at 20, right? Totally liberal, walking around saying, if government provided all the education, all the health care and everything, the world would be so much better place. And Government's just got to help the poor. Why aren't they helping the poor? They need to help the poor more. There needs to be more government programs. I was actually walking on Colfax in Colorado, walking along Colorado Boulevard University towards the zoo where I worked. And I asked myself one question. I said, Krista, you talk a lot about helping the poor and how you want the government to help the poor. What have you done to help the poor? And it came up empty. And I realized one thing, that when we outsource our compassion or outsource our passion to the government, the more the government does, the less the people will do. And so we need to not fall for even outsourcing our power as individuals to the politicians, even the politicians we agree with. We need to model the behavior we expect in others. We need to espouse the views that we want adopted. We must never stoop to unethical behavior, because ultimately we will stab ourselves in the back. And I think ultimately we could be successful.
You just made me think of a question, and that is, what made you think and internalize all of that and question yourself about what you were doing? Do you remember what it was that triggered you into that way of thinking? Because that seems to be the key for a lot of people.
So when I mentioned cognitive dissonance, that's cognitive dissonance. It's, you say you love the poor, you're not doing squat for the poor, right? And so cognitive dissonance, you can deal with it a couple of different ways. You can have a couple of drinks and it will go away. You can think about something else. You can do a lot of things to disregard it. But I have one of those temperaments where I can't. I'm just too intense. And so it ate at me. I said when I was about 20 years. The short story is that, so I worked for 2 members of Congress, worked for the Heritage Foundation. My dad got terminal cancer. I moved back to Colorado. I applied for a Lincoln Fellowship Scholarship to go out to California for 2 weeks, smoke cigars, and learn about the Constitution. And I got picked, and I went there, and I smoked cigars. I learned about the Constitution, read the Federalist Papers, and we had this tome of stuff. And read it, and then internalized a lot of it. I think I'll end on a quote by the Grateful Dead. What a long, strange trip it's been.